Welcome back, everyone, to 123 Chess. My name's Luke,
I'm Tom.
and we're here to go over our analysis of our game 8 with the Caro-Kann defense, something we've never really done formally like this before. So pretty excited about this because it was very new for me. Tom's been kind of practicing with it, and it was really, really interesting to see how it played out. So I guess I will kick it off since I was playing in as white. And all right, so Caro-Kann defense is when black plays c6 here when white advances the e-pawn. And you know, the principled approach that you usually are shown is, well, when your opponent allows you to take the center, you might as well take it. So it's exactly what I did. But the problem with doing that with the Caro-Kann is it seeks to strike at the center right away. And if you look at it here, the idea is if white takes and then black takes, then white will have two pawns in the center, or black will have two pawns, whereas white only will have one. And I actually did that in this game because I don't know the Caro-Kann much, and I was scared about getting into more tricky lines that are more, shall we say, Caro-Kann specific. So now this is a very simplified game, which is kind of what I was going for. But you know, Tom liked it too, as we talked about, because, well, like I said, he's got the two middle pawns. I only have one, so that alone should lend to good options for black. But from here, I went knight f3, and well, he's asking to get pinned, so that's exactly what Tom did. And then we get to, so I removing the pin, obviously attacking this pawn, so I got to do something to get rid of that. After eventually he'll take my knight, but maybe. Okay, this was interesting. I have played a few Caro-Kann games, but when I usually don't see the bishop being fianchettoed by black. So that was kind of cool to see in our game, which tells me that Tom definitely had some sort of game plan. Okay, so now he's got two pieces hitting this pawn, so that's what I'm thinking about. And I decide to just solidify my pawn structure, my pawn chain. Okay, and this was really interesting. I know I'll let Tom talk about his reasoning behind it, but this was, I was not expecting this at all. But the idea is, one of the things is eventually if I get ready to double up on the diagonal with my king or my queen and bishop, the idea is then Tom can move the knight out of there. And there's a lot of ideas where that prevent him from losing his strong bishop. So I decide to get my rook in the game. All right, now I'm starting to, I'll say it in a little bit, but I'm starting to feel really cramped in my position. I don't really, like, everything's kind of like, okay, we're just each doing our own thing, but I don't really have much of a game plan, whereas usually I have some sort of plan of attack. And now it's just kind of like, I'm just trying to get my pieces coordinated, not blocking each other. Okay, so I'm gonna kick the bishop. Bishop moves back. All right, now obviously the threat is basically coming and attacking my pawn chain. Okay, now this was interesting. This was an interesting idea because I moved my knight here so I could attack the bishop, which at first glance seemed quite awesome. But then Tom did this. And this was the first moment that I really felt kind of stuck. And Tom and I discussed this a bit, and you know, obviously the threat is pretty obvious what he's going to do at some point, which is, you know, pretty good of a threat. But because he just ignored this bishop that could be attacked by my knight, I really had to reassess the position, because I'm like normally you don't want to lose a bishop for knight, but that's super generalization. And so if I take the bishop, then he takes that. What I realize is these two doubled pawns, once this pawn moves there, once they march down the file, they're actually really strong. And they're not really normal doubled pawns because they're attacking the center. So this actually was my first critical moment that I chose to go over. So in this position, like I said, I began to feel like my pieces weren't coordinated well, and I was struggling to develop a game plan. So I ended up playing knight g4 in this position. The problem with this is that, check out this really, Tom placed that knight there for a good reason, but at the same time, it's not really serving much of a helpful purpose toward the middle of the board, because, knights you usually want to have within here, right? And so the fact that this knight's out on the side, it would have probably been advantageous for me to actually just leave that knight there and not try to go after it. So this right here, though Tom moved the knight away, and I think it actually wanted him to capture with the bishop and the knight or something with the series of exchanges. It's still, this move that by me was definitely an inaccuracy. So what should I have done? Well, I think one of the challenges for me is because I was trying to think of super obvious, like advantageous moves. I couldn't find any, and that's where I did that move. But actually, what the computer actually recommended, which I looked over, is just the simple bishop, which, to be fair, like this move by me it was just an inaccuracy. It wasn't technically a mistake or a blunder, but it was like one of those things where it didn't really serve a good purpose, and it also helped Tom's position. And so what I did, if I did this, let's say I did this bishop move. Okay, well, at first glance, it seems like, okay, well, it's 6, 1/2 dozen the other. Why does that really make much of a difference? But well, number one, it opens up my rook a little bit. Number two, it kind of coordinates with my, once I decide to use this knight to attack his bishop, if I choose to do that, then I can swing my knight out of the way at some point. And then I have two pieces hitting this. So then I'll take the pawn that takes it. And so then once he gets his queen in, I can get my queen in. And we're talking about a series of exchanges, but in the end, I'll have the better position slightly. So just to be clear, in this position, the engine does have me at slightly, I think it's like 1.75. So it is slightly better for white here. And I think that is because of the looming threat with the bishop being taken. But again, the bishop moving out of there further unlocks the rook in the near future, which is not what I did before. Even though I did my knight move, that does it too, except for then when he takes this, then we get into this exchange variation instead of me owning the initiative. So did that kind of make sense, Tom?
I think that makes sense. I mean, I saw the engine recommend me take when you move the knight to g4, and I still am not sold on that.
Me neither. I really didn't look into it further because I was like, that's not, it just doesn't feel, it doesn't feel like great.
No, I mean, it's not that productive. Like, if I'm looking at it from the perspective of it's a little bit of a problematic bishop, maybe then.
Yeah.
I mean, maybe and the knight is also on the edge of the board, which I don't want the knight on the edge of the board, but I kicked it off the edge of the board, right? So
Yeah. Yeah.
I took care of that problem.
And after it, let's say that, we end up exchanging all the pieces off. Well, once we do that, what happens? I end up with a queen on g4. So
Yeah, you got to mobilize queen.
yeah, do you really want me to have a queen on g4? I mean, I know you can move your f pawn up. So like once my queen is here, then you can go like this, but still, like I just don't feel like that is really awesome, because then my queen will pop over here. Now guess what? My queen and knight are coordinated.
I have
So
a weakened pawn structure over on that side in front of my king because I can't cut my bishop, and
yeah.
I just don't
So
know.
but I mean, in all honesty, I didn't want, regarding this bishop move, I usually in my analyses go it really in depth, but this one, there's not really much to go in depth with. It's just kind of like, okay, it's a solid position. It's kind of a quiet move, but it's pretty obvious what it does. It gets ready for this knight to move out and then at some point take this. And it's also one thing also that it does is you know, like I said, I'm the one who kind of decides how the game proceeds, as opposed to the exchange in what could have happened. So anyway, so that was my first moment. And you're not going to believe this, but my second moment was the move after. And it's because, again, this whole situation was the challenge for me, where I was all bottled up and I couldn't figure out how to kind of like open the position for me. Okay, so in this one, I was still trying to figure out my development, you know, how to finish it off and get ready for an attack. I opted for bishop d3, also an inaccuracy. And the reason for that is, so the move that it actually wanted me to do in this position is knight takes. So, but the difference between this and if the knight took earlier is that once the knight takes here, and then you take it back with the pawn, I have a clear advantage after the bishop moves here now, because now I'm hitting this, you know, with my rook. And then after, you probably at some point would take the c pawn. I mean, maybe not now, but and so, I mean, let's look at things. Well, I mean, my pawn structure, yeah, my pawn chain is broken, but you know, I still have two connected pawns right now. Also, I was so stinking concerned in this position because of these pawns that I was, you know, knowing we're going to march up the board. But let's look at what I have. So 1, 2, 3 pieces covering the e5 square, versus if you were to move the pawn, so then take, oops, take, and then I end up, you know, so again, you'd still have to get your queen in the action, and then I'd get my queen. And, you know, there's just not real clear advantage for black here, whereas the line that played out for me, it ended up being a lot better for you. So this position was just basically, it was just to go back here. If I had decided to take, instead of moving this first, it was just an order of operations difference, but the difference did make a lot of sense because I'm maintaining the initiative that way. Whereas it was too quiet, and not enough developing threats for me to do. Okay, so then as we keep going, let me go back here. Okay, so I moved there. You doubled up on the diagonal. Then I felt like I had to take it. Okay, so now we're here, but it's you know, it's essentially the same as it was before, but check this out. You already have a queen there. Yeah, so that's the big difference right there. It's already pretty obvious. Okay, so this is my third moment. Again, all within like a couple moves. But in this position, I was afraid. I got really scared now, because now it's already been taken and they're getting ready to march up. So I realized that the doubled pawns are dangerous because of challenging my center. But again, I need to reiterate, where's the real threat? Because this pawn goes, this pawn takes, take, and take, and I still end out ahead. So this just goes to show you that when you're really scared about a position and you know, you see a threat, don't allow that to dictate your mindset the next few moves. Just do simple calculation, make sure that you have one up in the exchange if that happens, and then proceed from there. So what I actually should have done, well, what I did in this position is I got really scared. So I'm like, I got to take that knight. I got to do something. But what did that accomplish for me? I mean, really, what is this knight doing? Like, I saw that this knight was here, and I think, Tom, I told you that I was thinking that you had potential to like sack a knight or something in this position. But that
Did you check out that line?
I looked at it a little bit, but I couldn't find anything that actually wasn't filled, like, you know, filled with inaccuracies. So it actually, I mean, maybe it was possible, like if I went more in depth, but I couldn't find anything that was not at least one or more mistakes on your end. So I don't know. It's possible. I mean, you're an attacking player, so I feel like you might have come up with something, but it's really hard in this position to know that you'll come out at the end of that with a clear, you know, a clear winning position. Um, So, but yeah, so here we go again. I decide to make this hasty move, which didn't do anything but help his pawn structure, honestly. And did it with tempo, because look, after this gets taken, now the knight has to move. And then when I did this, check out how the things progress. Well, obviously, you know, if you didn't move the queen there, we both agree that I feel like this position is better for black, you know, because, you know, you at some point you can connect this if you want, but you already have a clear target right here, you know? So, yeah, so basically what I should have done instead of taking the knight is actually, again, a very seemingly quiet move, but it finishes, oops, but it finishes more of my development. And that move is bishop g5, which another reason why I didn't do this in the game, in addition to being scared about, you know, all that was going on and feeling like I need to exchange something, is I don't really see like where the purpose in the long run of this bishop is. Like, it's kind of sitting there in the open. It's hanging technically, but you know, you're not attacking it. And I was like, oh man, but what if he could just march this up? Well, so what? I mean, here we go again with, you know, like being scared about, you know, being scared about having a piece that I'm not sure what to do with. But if it's a solid developmental move, if you move the pawn up, then I can move just right here. And now I have another piece guarding E5. So it actually would have come out in my favor if you tried to kick it. So, but yeah, and I looked at a lot of different lines, Tom, in this, like of what you could do.
Yeah.
But one of the obvious ones is simply taking this pawn. And if I took that, then basically, usually one of the rooks would come out too. So probably you could have even switched up the moves, maybe brought a rook here first, kind of as
Yeah. That was kind of what my plan was, is bring a rook out.
So, but you know, I mean, this position is not really, it's not really clear winning for either of us. We would have gone into a pretty good end game, I think, for it. And then at any point in time, I could take this knight if I want, but again, like, what's the reason for that? Like, I would have to have a clear reason why that exchange is worth it. Because, you know, look, this pawn's hanging now, that kind of thing. Yeah, so basically, I think probably my biggest takeaways from this game, again, unlike some of my other games, I actually didn't really have many inaccuracies to go over that were super like, oh wow, this is profound. But I think one thing that was really clear is that, you know, sometimes your moves that you're developing with are kind of subtle and they don't really seem to develop a good plan, but you got to get all your pieces out there first, before you actually create an attack. And also, when you're moving a piece, you shouldn't just look at what it does for you, but also what it does for the other person. So in terms of back here, when I the first move that I mentioned, when I decided to move my my knight here, again, I needed to look at not only what it did for me, because I was trying to open this bishop, but it also gave you an opportunity to exchange off probably the weakest minor piece on the board. So that, I think that was probably one of my biggest key takeaways. In addition to the fact that just, you know, don't let fear of a potential threat prevent your simple calculation. And then I guess the last thing I'll mention is at the very beginning here, two of the lines I think I'll probably stick to with the Caro-Kann, as if black plays it against me as white, then once this happens, there's either the advanced variation, or there's the classical where you bring the knight out first. And either one gets a pretty interesting game. I guess in some ways similar to the Sicilian, because white generally will have only one versus the two pawns in the center. But actually, if white takes here, you can see that it actually is pretty equalized in the setup. So yeah, very interesting. So that is it for mine.
So I'm going to jump over to mine here. First, I kind of want to go over just what intrigued me about this. Actually, during our tournament, one of the other players, Luke, do you remember who it was?
Oh, it was when Ross was playing against Chris, I think, and
Yeah, and
then Ross was black.
yeah, Ross runs the Caro-Kann, and um, this is an opening that I really wasn't very familiar with. I see it on occasion, and it was always like, okay, well, no big deal. I already had a pretty well-established game plan if I'm playing white, right? Because I'm just going to dominate the center, and so that's my goal, is just like get my pawns in the center. And I usually was playing the advanced variation against the Caro-Kann, which ends up transitioning into um, a French defense quite often. And that was something that I was comfortable with. I've played against the French enough too that I'm happy with that. But yeah, the thing that I really started to enjoy about the Caro-Kann, the thing that really sold me on it, is I hate playing the Italian game. I hate it. And yeah, I mean, it's not that I'm uncomfortable with the Italian game. I'm bored out of my mind when I'm playing the Italian. I've played it so many times.
And if I could interject something, I think a lot of players would say that one of the best things about it too is that it prevents white from being able to do the Roy Lopez.
Both of those things, absolutely. So this gets me out of two birds, one stone, right? It gets me out of having to play Roy Lopez. It gets me out of playing the Italian game. So I do this, and yeah, that's usually going to be the typical response is taking control of the center. But again, just as Luke said, this is direct attack into the center, and then we go with the exchange, and that gets me here. I actually really like playing the exchange game, just because it gives us usually a little bit more of an open game. Our pieces have a little bit more room to move around, and we get a little bit more dynamic positions, which is usually what I prefer. Yeah, so I don't mind having that closed off game. I'm not in the Italian, so it's a good day. And then, yeah, just developing this bishop, pinning the knight.
I think you also mentioned you didn't usually see white play knight f3 first.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I don't see a ton of knight f3 first. I mean, it happens. It happens on occasion. When it does, it allows me to plop the bishop there.
Yeah.
Which I really do like bringing it out that far.
Mm-hmm.
That opening gives me a little bit of tempo in the development of my pieces. Okay, so then I decided to fianchetto. And I was really unsure about this. If you've watched past videos, you might have heard me say I'm not a huge fan of fianchetto bishop. But I have grown to be a lot more comfortable with it through all the studying that we've been doing. I haven't done a ton of in-depth studying on the Caro-Kann yet, but one of the first things that I did was a little bit of an introduction. I watched a video by the St. Louis Chess Club, and it was on. Maybe we can provide the link for that in this video. But when with the video that I watched, the gentleman that was presenting did fianchetto his bishop, and I liked the lines of play that it seemed to allow. The idea being you're trying to, obviously with any fianchetto bishop, you're controlling this big old diagonal. And then what you want to get into is a game where you're going to have white have a pawn structure that's right here, and you're going to end up coming in and attacking the pawn structure, which is exactly what ended up happening.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, something went according to my plan, and I was like, oh, yeah, this is a great game.
Yeah.
So that's what I'm doing.
I'm always impressed with that when we play. Like, I feel like you have much more solid understanding of kind of what you want to do with the opening, which I'm always quite impressed with.
And I just fall apart at the end game.
Nah.
Yeah, so I kick my knight over to this side, and Luke was kind of getting at it. So I haven't moved this pawn yet, right? So that spot for a knight move is not even an option currently. I could put it there, but if I'm putting it there on f6, it's blocking my bishop, which my bishop is pretty active right now. And I don't know what Luke's plan is against a fianchettoed bishop, but I can tell you definitively, my plan is very frequently when I see a fianchettoed bishop, I try to get my same colored bishop out, get my queen behind it, stick my bishop right over there so I can get the exchange and get that really powerful bishop off the board. So I figured by moving my knight here, this gave me the purpose of eventually I'm going to move my knight over to f5, which seems like a pretty good square for it, because now any attempt to bishop down here, I've got an additional piece that's defending the square. So all of those things were my logic moving into the move. I did say at this point in time, maybe I should do e5, but apparently I chose right because the computer did not like e5. And I think I figured it. I think that was a pretty obvious reason. Oh yeah, because if I did e5, oh, I have the variation down here. If I did e5, then the take can happen because this bishop is now being attacked and it's undefended, right? So
And I think it's also because your king is more exposed than mine. My king is safer.
Yeah, and this is what ends up happening, right? Is so you end up getting that the queen attacking the king. And that was just with a series of best moves. But honestly, the exchanges there are pretty obvious to happen, so that likely would have occurred. And you know, I was thinking maybe e5 because it brought his pawn out of the chain, right, and made it so I'd be able to attack it. But you know, one of the things that I wasn't seeing was the fact that he could really end up getting his queen down here, which leaves my king very exposed, especially since I have yet to castle.
Right.
And that was the other thing too, is this this move that I did. One of the big reasons for it was I was preparing for the castle.
Yep.
And that's what I do. Yeah, so once again, with this, what I am trying to do is I am trying to start to launch down this attack to weaken the base of his pawn structure. And so that's where I'm going there. Then this happens, and I move here. St. Louis Chess Club, right? Because, again, video that I had seen, and I'm sure the point at which our game is entirely different from where their game was at the time, the game that he was going over. However, he did bring his bishop here, and when I saw him bring his bishop to e6, my very first thought was gross.
It'll have double pawns though if he takes.
Yeah. That looks terrible. My bishop is blocking my center pawn from advancing. Yeah. Now, I don't know if that was the best spot to bring it, and obviously bringing it here would have been a choice. What I like about it is by not bringing it here, I still have my queen defending this pawn. I don't feel like the bishop is in a necessarily bad position. He's still, still controlling some squares over on the side of the board, right? Even attacking that one, which is a weak pawn for the king side here. But mostly, I really wanted to do it just out of morbid curiosity, probably more than like, how bad is it? Like, this is a fear that I've had for so long, is putting my bishop in front of one of my center pawns. And I figured, you know what, let's give it a shot here. Let's give it a shot and see how it goes. So I did. The engine did like it, but actually preferred the exchange to F3. So the engine did want the capture of that night.
That's weird. I mean, because that just helps my development.
It does help your development. So I'm not sure that I prefer the capture of the.
Yeah.
I
don't.
Certainly did not suggest to retreat my bishop here. But in all fairness, I did not look up that move to see what the engine thought of it. So then we're continuing with development, and like I said, that's my plan. Attack that pawn structure, that pawn base. And then he moves up here, and I'm looking at this, and I'm like, well, I wasn't sure if that was good moving my bishop there in the first place. Okay, go ahead and take it. I really don't care about it. It's gonna file for my rook. And the 2 pawns in the center of the board actually do seem really strong. So I said, okay, continue with my plan, which is actually another thing that Luke and I have kind of discussed as an area that I need to work on, is not necessarily just constantly responding to my opponent's attacks, but rather continuing with my own plans of development and forcing my opponent to respond to mine. So this was a perfect opportunity for that right here. And then we get this here. And, you know, I do think the engine saying take there. No, I'm looking at the wrong one. I'm all over the place. Hold on. Where are we? Here.
Yeah, right here. Oh, yeah, before you moved it.
So I do think the engine saying take there. I mean, to be fair, like the concern is I'm giving you the opportunity to bring your queen out. But I guess at the same time, this is a relatively active piece for you. And you've got this is a relatively active piece for you. And this piece and this piece right now really aren't doing that much for me.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I think in that regard, if I'm doing this, followed by this, I don't know.
Yeah.
It seems okay. I mean, my pawn structure, I mean, especially after something like that, right? I have a really good pawn structure.
Yep.
So maybe, you know, maybe that was the way to go. The computer usually knows what it's talking about. That's not what I did though. I you know, like I said at the beginning, this was my intention. This is the spot that I wanted to be the permanent home for my knight. And so I had the opportunity to move it there. Luke gave it to me, so I did. I liked it because it is attacking that pawn. Again, that goes with my plan because I'm trying to weaken this pawn structure to just start dominating in the middle here. So we get this. Yep, helping the attack there. And there the exchange goes to opening up that rook, which is what I had kind of planned on doing. And I liked that. And I did also put in my notes here that this is something that I would not have done before. And that this would have been no, like don't double up those pawns. This is terrible. But I really liked what it actually did. I liked what it did to my position. And then the really funny thing was Luke does this, and immediately it's like, well, any reservation that I had about having double pawns, because now I don't have double pawns anymore.
Oh man, it's so funny. Yeah.
And I didn't look at the turning point of the game because you did have a slight advantage up until one point, and it was probably this point. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. If I had not taken that, so if you go back, yeah. So right here, this is where my third moment was when if I were to move my bishop to G5, I would have had the clear advantage.
but I think here allowed me to end up take the advantage. Because this, again, this is what I've been prepping for this entire game, right? I see this opportunity. The knight comes out here, and I get to capture. He has to recapture with that pawn because otherwise I'm going to take his rook with the bishop. So he's recapturing with that pawn, and now I get to recapture with the next pawn, and then he does this, and I have successfully done exactly what I've been trying to do this entire game.
Dun, dun, dun.
First time for everything, hey, it went according to plan. And I'm like celebrating, yay, everything went according to plan.
Yep.
And then what do I do next? Just throw it out the window. Throw it out the window. I don't need that plan anymore.
But if I didn't have check on this move, you wouldn't have thrown it out the window.
And that was the thing. This is what I missed, I missed, so my thought here was obviously, well, I'm attacking this pawn. I liked this position because I'm like, okay, well, I've got the 2 attacks on this pawn now, so I'm going to be ready to move my bishop, take that pawn on my next turn, and then I'm eyeing down on this one as well, right? All of that seemed great. I was perfectly happy with all of it, and then Luke did this, which I was expecting him to do. I knew that I pulled my defender off. I didn't recognize that was check. And so with that being check, that threw all of my plans out the window, and I needed to start from scratch. Because I figured, he was going to get to do that, and then I'm going to get to do that, and that looks bad for Luke. But nope, that check threw all of my plans out the window because now I have to waste a move doing this. Really is what tipped the scale into Luke's favor coming into this end game. Though I will say, interestingly enough, Luke, just looking at the analysis here, the game certainly wasn't over.
No, not at all.
And I did put up a decent fight here. Like most of these weren't considered bad moves. We have this, right? And it wasn't until this move, actually. This move was considered the mistake that really ended up sealing the deal in favor of Luke. And the big reason why, because at this point I'm thinking, well, I'm just going to move that forward because I want to stop that pawn advance. I don't know what the entire logic of it was. Maybe activate my bishop too, right? Even though,
yeah, I think that's what you had in mind, probably.
Yeah, because my bishop feels really useless because my bishop is really useless at this time.
Which is a bummer because he was allegedly going to be your, most powerful piece on the board.
Exactly. Yeah. But when I moved this forward, I enabled Luke to bring down this bishop here, which was just completely devastating. It was a really nice lock, getting that bishop there with the pawn, because now my biggest strength that I had remaining on the board was these doubled up rooks. Now they're stuck behind a very permanent looking bishop. I have no good way of dealing with. And so I tried to deal with it the best way that I could, right, was getting this out. The problem is this pawn advance is just happening too fast. And I noted here in my own personal notes as we were playing the game,
yeah,
please, I worked so hard. I worked so hard at breaking these 2 pawns up. That was my entire goal. I finally got it, broke those 2 pawns up, and then sure enough, he managed to get them back together. It was just demoralizing.
They were inseparable. They had a magnetic attraction to one another.
Exactly. And then from here, it was all over with crying. And then when this happened, now I pulled the plug here, but it was a really interesting game. And I think, like Luke said, like there weren't a lot of big errors that I caught myself getting into. There were definitely some concepts that were noteworthy, that we definitely discussed, which would have made a different game, right? And we could have maybe had a slight advantage if we had done something in a slightly different way throughout most of the game. But for the most part, it was really solid chess. And full disclosure, I'm doing is playing some correspondence games, and that's what this one was.
Mm-hmm.
This was a correspondence game. So, you're not, hopefully we are going to be making less errors, right? Because it is a correspondence game. And that held true up until that queen there. And that was my biggest takeaway, right? My biggest takeaway was always watch out for not only your checking opportunities, but your opponent's checking opportunities as well, because they're game changers. If you can get a check and get some tempo going, it can really flip the game to your advantage. Like I said, at this move, the game wasn't over. The game was not over here, but this was a huge swing into Luke's favor and his advantage. The computer loved this move. And from solid play from Luke's perspective, which he obviously had, he's gonna have a good shot going into winning this game from this position.
Mm-hmm.
So that was my big takeaway. If I had no other takeaway, it was watch out for not only your checks, but your opponent's checks as well.
Yep. Nice. Well, shall we play through our memorized Grandmaster game?
I think that sounds great.
Sweet.
So I'll reset the board here.
All righty.
Look at that, it's a Caro-Kann.
Well, what do you know? Except this time the knight comes out first, which we both thought was kind of weird.
Yeah, it's a little odd.
White was a slightly higher Grandmaster player than, or black was slightly higher than white in this, and you'll see why as time goes on. So he takes.
Take and take.
Bring the pawn up. Get your share of the center.
Yeah, and we start to get some odd things happening here.
Yeah, like Tom was saying earlier, it's kind of like both sides were trying to like guess what each other was going to do and just kind of stop it right away. So it was really very odd order of play.
Yeah, because there's nothing attacking this pawn right now. So moving this pawn really it stops the knight from moving to c3, which it really likes to be there.
Mm-hmm.
And now we move the knight up there for the attack. It's not going anywhere.
Yeah.
I don't mind this queen move, but it seems a little out of order with the bishop, in my opinion, because I like being able to stick that pin on there.
I know, and now it's like there is no pin.
There is no pin. I don't know entirely what the purpose of that one is. And then we get castle. And then from here, we do this nice little attack down here.
Yeah, nice. So if the knight was to move, then it would be a pawn to snatch.
Or we did the exchange now, right?
Yeah. So that's why probably why white brings the other knight in here to help.
Yep. Castle.
Okay, and then I thought this was a weird move where the knight plops over here.
Weird move indeed.
I mean, it like kind of permanently stops that threat, but then yeah, it's just not very awesome.
And this was a really good attack that I saw that black ends up doing, right?
And then I feel like white should have known better that taking this is going to kick the other knight.
Yep.
So then the knight goes into a really odd spot way up there where pawns can kick it more.
And as we discussed, it was the only knight that was defending this pawn. So that pawn falls.
Mm-hmm.
With check.
With check.
Protecting that.
Okay, and then I believe I move up here.
This is sort of like a, you know, okay, we trapped the bishop, right? But black just takes here, and after this exchange, white is super open.
Yeah, white's king is looking pretty in danger there.
And I would have just captured that pawn with my queen.
Yeah, me too.
But I really like this because it's now attacking the knight.
Mm-hmm.
I can't protect that pawn either, so the pawn's got the one option.
Yeah.
That's what the pawn does.
Counterattack instead of moving the knight.
Which the engine actually recognized this as being a mistake.
And then I feel like just take.
And once again, just kind of talking about obvious play versus what was done. This is not what I would have seen. I would have said, okay, well, this is my opportunity to get another piece into the mix, right? I can bring my rook down, have the open file. I mean, I would consider this move as well, right? Because now I'm solidifying my pawn structure on that side that I'm attacking the king. So I kind of like both of those, but what ends up this, which I do think is a really solid move. I love this, but
yeah, because then if white tries to do something like this, well then this is checkmate.
Yeah.
So it's pretty cool. Okay, and then at this point, I believe I go here.
And these were both considered errors. There were a few errors here that occurred in the attack, but
yeah, I feel like more errors than usual for a grandmaster game.
And this right here, I don't understand this move at all. Yeah, I mean, it gets your rook connected, but I mean, moving your bishop here or here would have done the same thing in terms of getting it connected.
Yeah.
Be safer, but I don't know. I mean, to be fair, the advantage is certainly in Black's court right now. I also don't know what their time was like on this game. Do you have any?
Maybe he was getting low on time, or I don't know, because it's like a desperado move that doesn't accomplish anything.
Yeah, because that's just a free bishop to scoop up now, bishop for pawn exchange. And this rook over here with the king in the corner is looking really powerful.
Yeah. And I think you said that was an error too. Oh, wait, no. I think the next one, not that one, but.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that one was an error. It might have been, but I'm not sure. This is a blunder. The next white move is a blunder. Because from here, what ends up happening is white gets checked, or black gets checked, and then able to come down here for another check. And then this is where white resigned. There's checkmate in 2. You could pause your video if you wanted to try to find it. And if you took a moment to pause it, what it is going to be bringing down the rook here. That's a forced move, and then that's me.
Yep. Yeah, so quite a few moves where black was just kind of dominating, just kind of owning the flow of the game. So, and a lot of it, I feel like a lot of it revolved around underestimating the danger of that knight that he plopped over on, what was it, E3 or something like that.
Yeah.
And then, yeah, it just kind of went from there. So yeah, really interesting Caro-Kann defense, new one for us, but as you can see, it really gives black some good potential and strays away from lines that normally would have a lot of options for white, such as the Ruy Lopez and the Italian game, and is very interesting for what can happen in it. So, well, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, one additional bonus that I've gathered from the Caro-Kann as well, having really enjoyed playing it, is I also see a lot of D4 openings, and my typical response in the past to a D4 opening, which we've gone over several times, has been if we're seeing a Queen's Gambit, I've been playing the Alpine Counter Gambit. Because I don't like to see the Queen's Gambit. The Alpine Counter Gambit has been one way of dealing with it. Well, something that Luke and I have kind of discussed is by doing this, actually, you're really just inviting white to do this. If they've played a D4 opening, following that up with E4 after you've done the C6 move just seems like a no-brainer. And once this happens, you can still get into the Caro-Kann from that D4 opening as well, which I think is really cool because then it puts the ball into the court where, it's the game that I want to play, which is what we're starting to figure out a little bit in our opening repertoire that we're developing. Is the goal is in the opening to try to steer it into a game that you are most comfortable with. And that's one of the big things that you're trying to accomplish here in the opening. And so that's one of the things that I've really enjoyed about the Caro-Kann. So I get a lot of play with it because I see it with the two most common openings, E4 and D4. So I've really enjoyed playing it as black and definitely recommend it.
Cool. Thanks, Tom. Yeah, well, thanks, guys. Hope you benefited from our findings today, and just encouraging you guys to continue to improve your game and work on the things that you need to learn. But until next time, have a wonderful week.
Take care.